So Bernie Sanders went on Chris Wallace's show on CNN, and they had a debate here about billionaires and oligarchy. Let's watch, and we'll break it down as we go.
Where he says oligarchs run America much as they do in Russia. I wanted to know, who are these American oligarchs?
You know who they are. They're people like Elon Musk. It's the billionaire class that has enormous power. Let's just take a look at what's going on. Today, the people on top are doing phenomenally well, and we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of this country. You got three people.
I will just say as a side note, this stuff does ring a little more hollow when there's Marianne Williamson running and Bernie endorsed Biden on day one. I get it. I steelmanned his argument. You know, hey, I don't want to lose my influence. I think I could push Biden to be more progressive than he would be otherwise. If I don't back him, I lose that sway. I get it. I steelmanned his whole position when I covered it the other day. But the fact of the matter is, it definitely rings more hollow when you have a candidate who agrees with your ideology much more, Bernie, and you actively overlooked her immediately to bend the knee to Joe Biden, who showed us what he is. He's still an incrementalist. He's still an incrementalist.
Who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. That is bad from a moral perspective, and it's bad from an economic perspective.
But Russian oligarchs are close associates of the central government who took over state-run industries.
Right.
The people you're talking about, the so-called American oligarchs, are self-made entrepreneurs who created big businesses that employ millions of Americans.
All right.
Okay. He absolutely, positively, on purpose leaves out the most obvious fact, which is what? Because of corruption, because of legalized bribery, these companies pay the politicians, and the politicians rig the rules and laws in their favor. So these companies get deregulation, no cop on the beat to make sure they're not breaking laws and committing crimes on a regular basis and polluting and things of that nature, not treating their workers right. Like, that's a huge issue. And then also, they rig the tax laws. So now you have billionaires pay a lower effective tax rate as a percentage than many working people do. So he leaves all of that out. He also leaves out that a lot of these, big businesses are totally subsidized. How many times have the taxpayers rushed in to bail out, Wall Street financial firms? It happened all the time. They bail out the banks all the time. So stop and think about it. Capitalism needs to be saved by socialism. It never works the other way around. Socialism, the taxpayers rush in to bail out the capitalists. So he leaves all of that out of the equation. He just, no, they're self-made in America. All these are just brilliant businessmen. You'd have to be a child to believe that, look, all these billionaires, they just worked harder. They're just the most brilliant. They just developed something that's good and people like it and they're reaping the rewards of that. He's making the argument, the argument implied is it's a meritocracy. But it's not, Chris. It's not even close to a meritocracy, and you know that. Most people who are billionaires are literally just money changers. They push money around on a screen, and they get compensated ridiculously for it. But so there's really not that much of a difference between Russian oligarchs and U.S. oligarchs. Yeah, there are differences, right? And I don't want to like brush over them. There's definitely differences, but it's not nearly as much as he thinks.
Because I'm not suggesting that oligarchy in the United States is like it is in Russia. I'm not suggesting that we're an authoritarian country like Russia is. But what I am suggesting, and not only suggesting what I believe to be true, and the facts back it up, is you got a small number of people in this country, Chris, who have enormous power over our political life and our economy. And the result?
That's true, but I think he's still going a little soft on him. I would have preferred a much more hard-hitting reaction.
Is massive income and wealth inequality. Over 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. People on top doing phenomenally well. All right. Then you have concentration of ownership. You want to talk about oligarchy? You got three Wall Street firms, Blackstone, State Street, and Vanguard, that control assets of $20 trillion. They are the major stockholders in over 90% of the S&P 500 companies.
But wait. But when you're talking about Blackstone, for instance, and I happen to know about it because my son works there, they are investing the money of the teachers' funds, of public employees' funds. Those are real people.
They're also, I don't know, I forget whether it's Blackstone or BlackRock, both of them exist, but they're buying up houses all across the country and then renting them back to people at exorbitant rates and price gouging them. They're also doing that. You have any words of criticism on that, Chris Wallace? Or are you going to sit up there and pretend like all these guys are brilliant white guys with suits and ties on, so they must have earned everything they got, right, bro?
Of course they
are getting their pensions.
But what I'm talking about, you
process.
asked me about oligarchy, I'm talking about power. If you have 3 Wall Street firms that combined are major stockholders at over 90% of the major corporations in America, determine who's on the board of directors, I think that that is real power.
But let me pick up on this, because in your book you say flatly billionaires should not exist.
That's right.
And one of the targets that you go after is the Walton family.
Yeah.
Sam Walton had $25 billion net worth when he died. And obviously you'd be upset about that. On the other hand, Sam Walton built Walmart. Let me finish, sir. Built Walmart, which is the biggest single private employer in the United States. It employs 1.5 billion Americans. Are you saying the country would be better off without people like Sam Walton and business?
Sam Walton pays less than a living wage. Still to this day, Walmart pays less than a living wage. They also, have you ever seen the movie, I think it's called The High Cost of Low Prices? It's about Walmart. It's called, I think it's called The High Cost of Low Prices. It's a documentary on Walmart. They also exploit Chinese labor overseas. They pay them pennies on the dollar, and then they ship the stuff here. It's very poor quality. It's a race to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom. So you outsource jobs, you pay Chinese children pennies on the dollar, you ship the low quality stuff back here, people pay for it, and doesn't cost a lot, but it doesn't cost a lot for a reason, and the workers make very, very, very poor wages. And by the way, what happens? A lot of the workers at Walmart have to go and get on Medicaid, have to go and get on the SNAP program, the food stamp program. So taxpayers end up giving to Walmart through a backdoor subsidy tens of billions of dollars just so the workers there can get by. So for him to bring up this example as if it makes his point is beyond preposterous. You know what Bernie's calling for? Bernie's calling for those Walmart workers to be unionized. He's calling for them to make a living wage. He's calling for them to get free health care. That's free at the point of service, paid for via tax dollars through a single-payer healthcare system. He's talking about, hey, no more outsourcing jobs that belong in the United States of America. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about things all down the line. People agree, the majority of Americans agree with every single one of those things. And Chris Wallace thinks he's got a slam dunk point. But what about Walmart? They never did anything wrong, right? Everybody loves Walmart, right?
Like Walmart?
Chris, what I am saying is you're asking me to be critical and attack these people. I'm not doing that.
Well, you say billionaires shouldn't.
You should. I get what Bernie's saying. Talk about the system. Don't talk about the individuals. That's true. The sentiment behind that makes sense. But also, in the case of Walmart, he happened to pick a good example of, like, these are greedy bastards. They are. And the rules of the system are so absurd that, yes, with those rules, this shouldn't exist. If you improve the rules and the laws and make it fair to the workers, then that's a different conversation. But the way it is right now, yes.
That's right.
You call them American oligarchs.
I do.
Yes.
But it's not a personal attack on the Walton family or Musk or anybody else. It is an attack upon a system. You can have a vibrant economy without 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Do I think people who work hard, create new businesses, should become rich? I sure do. Do I think that they should have $50 billion or $100 billion when you got 500,000 people who are homeless in America today? When you got 85 million people who can't afford health insurance? No, I don't.
In your book, you ask the question, how much is enough? So let me get you an answer from you. How much is enough?
I think we should go.
He basically already told you. He said billionaires shouldn't exist. So you'd have 100% tax on all net worth over $999 million. That's what he's saying. Now, silly people might object to that, but it's the idea anybody needs more than $1 billion in net worth is absurd, because you know what? Once you get to that level of wealth, that corrupts democracy by its very nature. Because we've decided in this country the Supreme Court has money equals speech. Well, guess what? If that's the case, the people with the biggest bank accounts have the loudest voice and they will control the system. Then we're no longer a democracy. We're an oligarchy. We're a kleptocracy. And that's a form of authoritarianism. That is undemocratic. And so when you argue for redistribution of wealth, when you argue for taxing the wealthy, what you're arguing for is democracy. What you're arguing for is more of a meritocracy and giving people at the bottom a fair chance. Telling you, once people with their net worth gets over $1 billion, no individual, no family should have that much money because it corrupts democracy by its very nature.
To the tax policies, the radical tax policies that exist under that communist president, Dwight D. Eisenhower. What do you think about that? That if you make a whole lot of money, you're going to pay a whole lot of taxes.
I think, I may be wrong, but I think back in the Eisenhower days, top marginal tax rate was around 90%.
That's right.
So basically you're saying that we should go back at a certain point, you get $1 and 90 cents goes to the government.
No.
That was a lie from Chris Wallace, and he knows that's a lie. Chris Wallace is smart enough to know what a marginal tax rate is, and he just lied to his audience, saying the government takes 90 cents of every dollar. No, that's not the way it works. The way it works is every dollar you make over $5 million gets taxed at 90%. So your first $5 million is taxed at a much lower rate. Every dollar over $5 million is taxed at 90%. And then, by the way, during the Eisenhower years, once you factor in all of the loopholes and the deductions and all the nonsense, the effective tax rate wasn't 90%, it was 43%. So it's 43 cents of every dollar over 1 million. Now, by the way, it probably would be better if it was 90%, 90 cents of every dollar over 5 million. But what he just did was a lie there. He left the impression with people that Bernie's calling for the government taking 90% of your money. You might be sitting there like, I make $34,000 a year. If the government takes 90% of my money, I can't survive. That's what Chris Wallace is trying to the implication he's trying to leave you with. That's what he's trying to make you think is Bernie's position. That is absurd. And again, that's a lie. He's smart enough to know that's not true. He's doing that on purpose. Bernie's saying every dollar over $5 million gets taxed at 90%. Everything under it is a much lower rate. That's what a marginal tax rate is. For the love of God, and Chris Wallace knows this, he's lying, but for other conservatives, if you're going to talk about this issue, for the love of God, know what a marginal tax rate is. They play dumb on purpose, and some of them actually are dumb, and they act like, no, that is what he means. He means take 90% of everything that you have. Absurd, 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 absurd.
You know that's not quite the way it works. It means that your top dollar at a certain level, it's not 90% of your entire income.
Well, by the time you make
it's
20
not,
or $50 billion,
it's the top dollar. And, people like Theodore Roosevelt, you know why Theodore Roosevelt established the estate tax way back when? Because he was worried precisely about concentration of ownership, of the rich becoming much richer.
But, you're saying that billionaires should not exist. So are you basically saying that once you get to $999 million, that the government should confiscate all the rest?
I'm saying that we should.
What if they took that money and built children's hospitals all across this country? High quality children's hospitals. What if they took that money, forget just children's hospitals, what if they took that money and built free hospitals all across this country? What about that? Or as many as they can with that money, right? However many it would allow you to make. It'd be a decent number. It would be a decent number. What if they did that? What if here, riddle me this, and this one always trips up conservatives. What if we took that money and all of it, 100% of it, went directly to a program to make it so there's no more homeless U.S. veterans? So look, if you oppose that, you're just against U.S. veterans. You're against helping homeless U.S. veterans. People who've paid the ultimate price and have served their country, and now they're living on the streets, and they don't have a pot to piss in. If you're against that plan, you're saying, I'd rather Jeff Bezos have $100 billion than get rid of the homeless U.S. veterans and give them some safety and security and a roof over their head. They act like it's such an absurd idea when really it's more the common sense position. Their position is radical. Their position is extremist. Chris Wallace is being extreme here.
Back to a very progressive tax policy like what we had under Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Which would mean that after over $1 billion, basically it all goes to the government.
You may disagree with me, but
I'm just asking.
See, it's like the way he's framing it, and Bernie's falling into this trap too. Wallace is saying it all goes to the government. Well, what's the government? To people, that sounds like it's going to the DMV and it's going to like Hunter Biden's wallet. No, Bernie needs to be clear. Let's take that money and put it towards children's hospitals. Let's take that money and get rid of homeless U.S. veterans. Give them a roof over their head. Let's take that money and give it to fill in the blank, fixing all of our infrastructure and making it the number one infrastructure in the world. You got to make it tangible for people because that's really the stakes of what we're talking about here. And Bernie's more on the defense than the offense.
Fine. Yeah, I think people can make it on $99 million. I think that they can survive just fine. Look, when I talk about oligarchy, it's not only the power of the people on top, it's what's happening to working people, and we got to talk about them. It's not only that so many of our people are struggling, it's that so many of our people can't afford health care, they can't afford prescription drugs, they can't afford childcare, they can't afford to go to college.
And you supported Joe Biden over Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson wants to directly address every single one of those things and go way further than Joe Biden does. And Joe Biden is an incrementalist who wants to barely address some of those things. So again, look, I hate to be an asshole, but this rings kind of hollow to me. It rings hollow to me. We'll hear all these issues. We have to take them really seriously. And that's why I'm going to back the guy who's less serious in tackling these issues. Again, I would have respected it if he just stayed out and let it play out. I would have respected that a hell of a lot more than bending the knee to Joe Biden on day one.
That's really what the United States of America should be about.
But you can do a lot of that and not basically upend capitalism.
It's not upending capitalism. There are countries around the world that have vibrant capitalist societies that provide health care to all of their people.
Right.
That make sure that you have a minimum wage, which is a livable wage.
I'm not arguing with you about that.
Okay,
yeah, but you are. But you are, Chris Wallace. I've never once seen you advocate for a living wage. I've never once seen you advocate for unions. I've never once seen you advocate for redistribution of wealth from the top to the bottom. So he acts like, oh, that's totally reasonable. If you say we can keep capitalism, but basically do social democracy, do a hybrid system that helps out working people, I'm on board for that. No, you're not. You never have been. You never will be. And right now, the whole purpose of this debate and this discussion is for you to leave the impression with people, oh, Bernie's crazy. Social democracy is crazy. This is insane. What are you talking about? Then at the very end, he tries to appear more reasonable by being like, oh, okay, as long as you're not talking about overthrowing capitalism, that's fine. Bernie has always been a social democrat. He calls himself a democratic socialist. He's a social democrat. He's talking about creating a capitalism that is way, way, way less vicious and more reasonable and more humane. That's all he's talking about. And people act like he's insane, right? And so this is Chris Wallace at the very end. Oh, I'm totally in favor of a living wage. I'm totally in favor of universal health care, bro. I never argued against those things. You have basically every day of your life in media.
Hear me saying, and I'm not, you read the book? I'm not saying that the government should be nationalizing every mom and pop store in the country. Of course I'm.
Shouldn't nationalize every mom and pop store for sure. Small business is something totally separate. Understood. But it should nationalize Big Pharma. It should nationalize the vicious health insurance industry. It should nationalize a number of industries. Oil. Why do we let ExxonMobil and Chevron and all these big oil companies, they go to the people's land and they get the rights to the oil that's in the ground? Whoa. That's the people's oil. The only place that doesn't do that is Alaska, where people they literally get a check in the mail. That's because the oil companies took the oil of the people. So if you're a regular citizen of Alaska, you get a check. But we have a system that's privatized. So not only are they ruining the planet because they're bringing about more climate change, they're also screwing the American people because that's their oil. That's our oil, and they take it from us. So a lot of things actually should be nationalized.
That you want vibrant entrepreneurs, you want small and medium-sized and large businesses to succeed. But we need to create a culture in this country which says that, you know what, it's not so great and not a good idea that some people have 100, 150 billion, a family has $200 billion when so many people are struggling.
All right, I mean, look, Bernie's right on the substance of all this stuff, but it also strikes me as hollow because he endorsed Biden over Marianne. He didn't even stay out. And also, he's a lot less aggressive than I would have liked to see him in this debate. I actually think Chris Wallace got the better of him, which is a shame, because Bernie's right on every single point here. But he's being a little too, like, no, that's not what I'm saying. No, like, he's sort of giving in to the framing. This required a much more aggressive pushback, because Chris Wallace said a lot of really, really stupid things, and people are not being left with that impression. So, not his best performance. Be more ornery, be more grandpa-like, be more cranky Bernie. because this one was not as cranky, and actually he's better when he's cranky. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.